Hi there, Christian Henson here. Hope you're all okay. It's been, particularly for some of you, an incredibly tough week, and my heart goes out to you. How about maybe the next hour and a bit of escapism into the world of nerditry and nerdism? And what a show we have for you this week. We have none other than Rick Beato, who I would say is arguably the biggest music educator on this platform, YouTube. And we'll be talking about... And if you haven't seen this film, just stop, pause, go. Away, now, go and watch. This is Spinal Tap. It is your rite of passage, if you're a music maker, to watch this film, the greatest film ever about making music, and also the funniest film ever, period. There's no discussion there. We've got a piano book with a difference this week. I'm just filming a highlights of the month for Piano Book with some amazing content. So what we've done is we've got a couple of new pianos, but also we're looking back at some classics that you may have missed. But first, what have you guys been up to?
Welcome back, everyone. It's Kellen, and it's time for you to show us how you've been nerding this week. John Mayer delivers with his Mayer Choir, available for free from his website, linked below, and Dan Keane gives us his thoughts on Spitfire's BBC Symphony Orchestra. Brood is back again with another amazing track, Isolate Bliss, and Sonny Greenwich shares what he's been listening to in sunny Kinsale. Justin Carmony needs your help with a sample of a rather expensive instrument that he's come across. And lastly, Trevor Morris provides invaluable advice on work-life balance in the music industry. Check out those videos linked below and keep showing us your inner nerd with the handle Nerding for the Weekend.
Now, when researching this week's show, I actually just typed piano book into the YouTube search field to see if anyone's done a review of our community and what we're up to. And I could only find one, and apologies for this because this is a belated shout out. This was done in November by a gentleman called Winslow. And if you're watching Winslow, thanks very much for the review. I really enjoyed it. It's linked below. Please, people, go and watch it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to his channel. As I've said before, subscriptions and likes are the lifeblood of YouTube creators. So do, if you enjoy their content, repay them with this gratitude, because there are benefits from certain levels of likes and subscriptions. And of course, do share via your own socials. Right, before we go to Mr. Rick Beato, and talking of YouTube, we're joined by a composer of great merit who I've really enjoyed the company of over the last 4 years. He's part of the Spitfire composer massive. In fact, he's the head of the kind of compositional department, master of all of us. But not only that, just an absolutely great guy that I'm very honoured to call my friend, Mr. Oliver Patras Vader.
What an introduction. Hey, Christian. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
So
I'm good. How are you?
Can you scooch out of the way, because I spotted? I just want to look at the studio. Look at this. Is this your home setup?
Yes.
So a pair of Coles, no less. Is that a pimped felt?
That is it's at the moment it's a double felt, but only on the lower 2/3 of the piano, because it sounds nicer on the upper third when it's less felt somehow.
Excellent. And then what's at the top there to your left? The top one.
Yeah, the top one is Ace Tone Rhythm Ace. Roland used to be called Ace Tone before they were called Roland.
Oh, really?
And that is their first drum machine.
I did not know that.
And it was on. I'm a big J.J. Cale fan. It was on his album Naturally.
Okay, amazing. And next one down, synth.
Yeah, that's a Mini Nova from Novation. I bought that actually several years ago when I was still touring. So it's kind of a good imitation. Sometimes it's when I do some scores and it needs a bit of a synthy touch. It does the job. Let's put it that way.
And then pedals underneath. Would I recognise those?
Yes, they are actually from you. So they are
stolen.
You got stolen. Yeah, you got them sent, and I've been using them to just create loads of sounds since then. Like they're all over the OPW sample library for Spitfire. It's the Strymon timeline, the Flint, and the Big Sky.
Brilliant.
And I just feel they're just
awesome,
sounding so good.
And in all fairness, I was sent them for free, so you're allowed to steal things that are sent for free.
Yeah, I've given some to the production team as well, so I'm sharing a little bit.
But the thing at the bottom is the thing that brought us together, the Wurlitzer.
Absolutely, yes. I use it to this date. Wurlitzer electronic piano. Bought it in Brighton for 500 quid.
Right.
Maybe 8 years ago. It's got, like everything vintagey, it's got its character and stuff, but I love the expressiveness of it.
And that's when you first visited my studio with that big group of people, that's yes. Our connecting point. Oh, you got one of these. Yeah, because I'm a Whirly fan. So. Mine needs to go to the doctor's, though. It smells of burning carpet and doesn't make any noise when you switch it on.
Oh, no, that doesn't sound good.
No, and it's dense, which I don't really... I'd love my Wurlitzer, but I don't want the shed to go up in flames. But
no. You got a few other toys lying around.
Yeah, a few bits and bobs to muck around with. So thanks again for Sunday. I think it was really popular and stuff. And if you haven't checked out Oliver, Louis, Paul Thompson and myself did a kind of warts and all interview, which is absolutely fantastic. And I think we covered our drinking habits and how lockdown has been for us and stuff. But you've got some news, haven't you? You're planning to do something new. You're working on some new recordings as well as your extensive work with Spitfire and stuff. But you're doing something else with video, aren't you?
I just thought I need more of an online presence. I need my portfolio out there as an artist, maybe as an educator, as a member of the community, really. And I thought of starting up my own YouTube channel.
Oh, fantastic.
Maybe in the form of like some live streams, TV show-ish, talking about creativity, talking about music, helping each other out. Maybe there will be some tutorials there, some live performances, interviews, etc.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to that, Oliver, because I've really enjoyed Paul setting his channel up. And it's really useful to exchange notes about stuff, you know, that... I mean, I'm going to be speaking to Rick Beato in a minute, and he's been so helpful with me about the importance of titling and thumbnails and all of these things. So it'd be really fun to watch your channel grow. And naturally, if you have any kind of wishes for Oliver, put them in the comments down below. Have you got a channel site yet? A URL we can link to?
Yes, it's looking rather empty at the moment. There is some things on there, but yeah, there is a channel in my own name set up, and I think I'm just going to use that. I've got already 400 subscribers.
That's insane. So if you link down below, go and subscribe and ding that bell, and you'll be notified the first time Oliver puts a video up. But I'll be sure to very much promote it here too, which is fantastic. Well, listen, mate, it's lovely to see you. And as I say, if you link to Oliver's YouTube down below, nothing there yet, but lots of stuff coming soon. And again, we'll promote it here. Best of luck with it, mate.
Thank you very much, Christian.
Cheers, pal.
Guys. Thank you. Bye.
Right, the moment we've been waiting for. Rick Beato has been YouTubing for just 4 years now, and in that time, he has surged forth to become one of the, if not the biggest music educator on the platform, with subscribers well north of 1.5 million. His channel shows what a thirst there is for learning in our field. But as his YouTube channel has evolved, I've also realised that he's an insanely good musician. It's an honour to introduce to you Rick Beato.
Hey, Christian.
How you doing? You all right?
Doing very well, thank you. You doing okay?
Yeah, I'm really good. I guess I have to start with the question, how has lockdown been for you?
Well, being here in Georgia, we're pretty much in phase 2, which means that just about everything is open. I wouldn't say things are back to normal. People wear masks when they go out to the grocery store, things like that. I haven't been to a restaurant. I mean, I hardly leave my studio here anyway, so really, as you can relate to, nothing nothing much has changed except my kids are here all the time, you know.
I mean, I guess you must be hearing from a lot of your friends and colleagues in the industry, obviously, that life is tougher for a lot of the music industry now, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's very difficult. And there's really no easy answer for them. Even if you're a well-known person, you can't just get on YouTube, for example, and have your videos be seen, because there's that algorithm that pushes your video content out. And if you don't have any subscribers, it doesn't matter how well-known you are, it will not push your videos out.
You've passed all sorts of milestones this year, haven't you? You passed the million. Was that this year?
It was last summer. I hit 1 million. I'm at over 1.5 million now.
That's incredible. So there is an exponential growth, isn't there?
It really depends on how big of videos you have. I'll go through periods where I'll have some really big videos back to back, and I get 100,000 subscribers in a month, and then it'll drop back to 60,000, something like that. But it really depends. I do content that I know won't get a lot of views because I want to do it. I do things that I want to do on my channel. So sometimes you hit on something, sometimes you don't.
I seem to remember you actually asking the people who are watching what kind of did they want more of. And am I right in saying that it feels to me that it's become a lot more educational of late? Yeah,
definitely. At the beginning, I was doing a lot of different kinds of videos. I did a lot of music theory, improvisation, and I did a lot of film scoring videos at the beginning of my channel. It's actually 4 years, June 8th, it'll be 4 years since I started it. And then I've returned back to doing more educational, almost all educational, with occasional things that are edutainment, I guess. I guess it's all that, that's what YouTube is.
As an avid viewer of Binging with Babish, which is a cookery show...
I know it well.
I imagine there are quite a lot of people wanting to improve their cookery chops. I myself purely look on it as a spectator. And when you're creating the content, are you aware that it is many people who really want to learn are going to pick up their axe after watching you take them through a mode or something? But there is also a degree of spectatorship of people just enjoying watching people doing amazing things.
On my channel, it varies from video to video. I have this What Makes This Song Great series. It really focuses on music production, songwriting, arranging. And then I have my videos on modes or on music theory that are really different, where I'm actually teaching things that people can pick up their instruments and learn from. So I have many people that watch my channel that don't play an instrument at all because of this What Makes This Song Great. People are really interested in seeing how songs are taken apart. Unless you go into a recording studio, it's like with film music. You just don't know how these things are done unless you know people that do them.
It is a dark art for many, is it not?
That's why your channel is so great, Kristian, because you do what I do. You take the mysteries out of these things. How do you get paid for a film? What kind of DAWs do you use for film composition? What are your sample libraries that you use, obviously? So people really don't know. Well, I think they do now because of YouTube, because of watching channels like yourself, how to do a mock-up, how to sample an instrument, how does sampling work. Until the last few years, you'd have no idea.
No, not at all.
About any of this. And there was no way to learn it, really. There were books and things, but most of the people that wrote the books didn't know.
Well, I left school in 1991. And this is still way, way before the internet. And I felt that I didn't have the qualifications necessary to become a film composer because I couldn't find out about Hans Zimmer, or even that Irving Berlin didn't read music, and therefore just you had to base it on the knowledge of people around you. And right, if you don't do this, you won't be able to do that. You can form your own consensus now, which I think is very interesting.
With people like Hans Zimmer doing creating mock-ups, the comparison in music production would be the advent of Pro Tools in 99 with the Digi 001. That was the equivalent of what Hans has done with everybody has to learn how to do mock-ups now. That's just part of the industry. For me, if if Pro Tools hadn't been invented, I wouldn't have known how to be a music producer, because I couldn't, at 37 when I started doing that, I couldn't go intern in a recording studio for 3 years to learn how to plug in a mic into a mic pre or anything, so that was crucial to that. And all this pro audio stuff has then moved over to editing video, which is pretty much exactly the same as editing audio. You look at the waveforms.
And I know that we've discussed this before, but I just think that with particular view of the context of the industry really taking a hit, and I imagine, we're going to be the last to get back to work, the tour, the concerts, and to a certain degree, my side of the industry, people going to the cinema again, I think we're last in line for this stuff. And what you've done is you've way ahead of the curve, recognised an opportunity to diversify. And do you think that's something that we should urge upon other musicians? The future is maybe looking at things differently and not kind of going, hang on, where's this revenue's gone? I want it back.
I've had many conversations with many of my friends, some of whom are new friends that are well-known musicians who had their entire year, just their calendar gone in, one day. It's March, and then you have no gigs for the rest of the year. So all your income is gone, and you have to figure out what to do. And it really, who knows when it's going to come back to normal? It's the same, people, who's going to sit in a movie theater, who's going to go to a concert, So you have to diversify with your with the way that you present content. It's one thing to make videos, to move to take your live concerts and make videos of them, present them on YouTube or Facebook. It's another thing to be good at it. That's the real trick, is how do you create compelling things that people are interested in watching? Is that teachable? I'm not sure. But every musician I know is struggling with the same thing. And I just look at when I get notifications on YouTube and Instagram, it's constantly. Every hour there are 5 notifications of of people releasing videos. There's live streaming going on, and people are just trying to do whatever they can do. But how do they turn it into income from there? That's the other part of it.
Well, that's where the entrepreneurial streak comes in. And I would say certainly of the long players, to excuse the pun, that I've met, people who've been in the industries and successful for a number of years, they at some point have become very business savvy. And it's not just about protecting stuff like your rights and making sure people don't rip you off. It's being somewhat entrepreneurial. We are self-employed. We run our own businesses that is us.
I was fortunate in not having that successful of a career as a music producer. I had a few platinum records as a producer, a few gold records. I had a #1 song even, but I wasn't really that successful. When I got into it in 1999 full-time, that was the beginning of the decline of the music industry, 2000 being the pinnacle of the most money made by record labels. And then, really by 2005, the budgets for records, I stopped getting major label records. I would get the occasional new band that a label would sign that would have a very small budget, and they would typically be all-in budgets for a record, and where they'd say, okay, here's the budget. You have to make the record. You have to mix the record. You have to help the band write songs if they can't do it, and you got to play their parts if they can't play them. They just give you the money. They expect you to deliver a record. But then even those started to dry up, and then it was making records for people that had budgets that they would borrow money from people or raise money via crowdfunding to make records. And because I wasn't a big name producer that would get a $300,000, $500,000 budget to make a record, or an advance like that to make a record, I would always have to scrap and make my living by going out and finding new talent and making records that way. So that was helpful for when I started YouTube, honestly.
And I think it's very interesting because when we look at like the history of the long player, the album, we're actually talking really only about a 30-year heyday, really, you know, from the end of the 1960s to kind of the end of the 1990s, artificially probably boosted by the whole format change to CD that suddenly happened. So it's talked about as if it's like this kind of ancient rite, but actually that was a relatively new, and, you know, that's kind of that, its day has passed. It's kind of settled back into part of the many ways we can earn money, I guess.
We would have these format changes that would sell content that was previously bought, whether it was going from the LP to the cassette to the 8-track, and then the CD arrived around 1983. But once it went to the MP3, that was the end of that. There were no more going back and buying the same album that you've bought, you know, A Hard Day's Night 5 times or whatever it would be. I've been watching a lot of films that are soundtracks or are based in music or on music, which seems to kind of be a lost art in itself, especially the album that spawns the big soundtrack. Those things were huge for record labels.
And Dirty Dancing was one of the biggest selling soundtrack albums of all time, was it not?
Yeah, yes. The Bodyguard. There were movies that were made about music scenes indirectly. There's a movie that I really like called Singles, which came out in 1992, and was made kind of about the Seattle music scene, but before it really blew up. Well, actually, it blew up during the making of the movie. And it's a fascinating movie because a lot of the famous bands, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, all the biggest bands are in the movie. And the director, Cameron Crowe, who made Jerry Maguire, he made Vanilla Sky, he made a lot of big movies.
Did you do Almost Famous? Is it Almost Famous? Or?
Almost Famous,
yeah.
He did, yes. So I have an interesting story about Cameron Crowe. So in my career as a music producer, I signed one band to a production deal. That was it, just one. And they were called I-9. And it was a female-fronted band with just a singer, a cellist, acoustic guitar, and a bass player. No drums, nothing, right? So
sounds very 2020.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I signed them to a production deal, and I started working with them for a few months. And I would get together once a week with them and go over songs that they had. And the singer was just all the players were incredible. But they just had something. So I was working on a record and with this guy named Trey Anastasio with this big American band Fish. He was the lead singer of it. And the band had this gig in town. And I said to them when they were going to do it, I said, listen, we've been working on all these songs. I said, record the gig. Here's $20. Give it to Shalom, who's the sound guy, who's a friend of mine. Have him record your set so I can listen to it. So they come back the next day. Here's the CD of the set, 2005, right? So I listened to it, and I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. And they won the Battle of the Bands that night. I was going to New York to meet with some record labels. I happened to have meetings with the presidents of a bunch of record labels because this guy, Trey, that I was producing, was playing at Carnegie Hall. So I go into this meeting with this guy at Universal Records, president of Universal Records, Avery Lippman, and he says, because I had a lot of bands that had gotten signed, he says, Rick, what are you working on? Is anything new? And I said, well, I've got this band I-9 that I'm working with. Well, let's hear something. I mean, Christian, I just listened to the thing just for a few minutes the night before. So I put it in, he listens to it, he says, this is amazing. Wow. What is this, So then I go to the next meeting with somebody else at Columbia Records, and I said, so Avery Lippman just freaked out over this, right? so this whole thing starts. Well, within a week, I'm out in LA, and I get a call, Rick, it's Cameron Crowe. And I mean, how many big directors at the time? I mean, 2005, Cameron Crowe he had just done Almost Famous, Jerry Maguire, massive, Vanilla Sky, I think he did, all these huge movies. And how many Cameron Crowes are there, right? Yeah. And how did he get my phone number? I'm sitting at Bob's Big Boy in Burbank or whatever eating. Rick, it's Cameron Crowe. what's up, Cameron? He says, listen, I got the I-9 recording, and I'm doing this movie called Elizabethtown, and I want them to do the closing credits song for it. Would they be interested? Would you be interested in doing that? And I said, yeah. Now, the band didn't have a record deal, but they had all these labels that were interested. They had a massive bidding war going on at the time. And Cameron, I was a huge fan of because he made this movie Singles, and he wrote Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He's been he's one of the biggest directors at the time in Hollywood. And when they ask you, hey, would you do the closing credits song? You say, of course, love to do that. But I was just watching this movie Singles recently, which is one of his movies that he made. He kind of knew that the Seattle grunge scene was going to explode because he just had his finger on the pulse. And so he got all these famous bands to be in the movie as actors, and he had live gigs, and it really documented the scene in Seattle in 1991. And I went to Seattle in 1992. Seeing that movie just brings you back. It's pre-internet, people talking on phones with cords, no cell phones, and in retrospect, looking at it, it's really fascinating to watch. But the soundtrack to that was all the big bands of the grunge era that were to explode. Nirvana exploded right when as the film was coming out. Pearl Jam, who's in the movie, acting, a couple of the guys from the band are acting in the movie. I mean, it was really unusual, and this was a huge soundtrack also. So this is and it's funny because a lot of people don't even know this movie anymore because it's stuck in time in 1992, but it's a great movie, and it's the music is so important from it, and to have that connection then for me to work with Cameron on this song that he wrote with his wife at the time, Nancy Wilson, who was in the band Heart, who he was married to for years. So they wrote the song together, and this band I-9 did I produced the track for the movie. And it was a closing credits song. So it was really, that was interesting. I've had a lot of songs in movies as well as a music producer, songs that I've produced with groups. But this was to be able to actually interact with a director about it.
And that director to be Cameron Crowe.
And it being Cameron Crowe, that was a pretty big thing. And I have never talked about it on my channel before. I never thought about it until today, Christian, when I was drinking coffee this morning, and it just occurred to me that all happened because I had watched that movie recently.
Incredible.
Yeah. So, and there's a song. We were talking about songs for this, and there's a song that's in that movie that was by Chris Cornell, the late Chris Cornell, called "Seasons," which also happens to be in Hans Zimmer's movie, the Man of Steel movie. He used that same song. There's only a couple incidental pieces. I mean, that one really stands out because they play a good minute and a half of the song in the movie. And it was already in Singles. It was featured in the movie Singles, the same performance. And it's just a spectacular song. It's one of my favorite songs of the era and one of my favorite songs ever. But it's interesting to see a song used in a couple different movies like that.
Yeah, those kind of big moments. You do get those kind of real sync hits, don't you? I think I would have to say I Feel Good by James Brown is probably...
That's been in a few.
It's been in a few. It's something that I always tell people if they're doing production music with lyrics or looking for stuff that's going to be sync-friendly, is you'll find that it's the songs that aren't about love tend to get synced more. Or there was that Bobby McFerrin track, wasn't it? Don't Worry, Be Happy.
Yeah.
And it's just those kind of quite generic lyrics, I think, are kind of interesting. But I always say if you're writing a song to get synchronized, I think that's a non-starter anyway.
I probably had 30 songs in movies, something like that I've produced. And none of them, they were all done for albums, obviously.
I've worked on a lot of films which have had kind of big soundtracks are maybe 5 or 6, maybe even more, like a Mandy Moore film I did. And I would say that easily more than half of the synchronizations come from sources outside music supervisors. And it'll be something that the director's listening to or something the producer's falling in love with, often something that the editor's playing with. And I know certainly something that Daniel Pemberton, who is risen to the absolute top in recent years, I know that something he did in the past was really get friendly with lots of editors and say, listen, here's some music for you to cut to. And I think editors are very kind of love to have a bit of something fresh that isn't, I don't know, American Beauty or something,
Right. Once you have something as temp music like that and people get attached to it, that's a quick way to get a sync. It's hard to get syncs. It's really hard. I have people ask me about that all the time, and I say, you're just better off writing and recording songs and being an artist, because the chances of it happening is so small. It's difficult. It's difficult. I mean, obviously there's people that it happens to all the time, but to go out there and write actual songs to try and get syncs is very difficult.
Well, I spoke a couple of weeks ago to Gary Barlow from Take That, and he just, his one piece of advice is, it's got to be good. Right. And I think working hard, just being brilliant and being nice, I think are the only three, and they're not guarantees, but they're the three boxes. I think, again, for that thing of it's not just having that sync and having that hit. It's about if you want a life in music, I think those are three of the things that we probably find as general. You watch Quincy Jones in a room with people, you just go, people like being in a room with you, but by God, you work hard as well, and you're excellent at what you do.
That's right. I mean, being good at what you do is never hurts.
It sounds like a truism, but it is amazing how, you go, you'll listen to something, you go, do you think that is good enough? Because there's a lot of competition out there, In
YouTube, not only is the competition great, but the competition has gotten greater with all the new people that are on YouTube now that are out of work, musicians, and that are creating content. I'm really curious to see what happens when things finally return back to normal, if people that have started on YouTube or wherever, if they'll continue to do that.
The thing with YouTube, because I've had a lot of people inquire, is that I would say more often than not, the route to a high subscription level, which is what you really need for it to be a commercial concern, requires a heck of a lot of work. The thing that you said to me has haunted me to this day. Just keep uploading.
I know. Christian, I was talking to a friend of mine earlier this morning. He was the guy that said this to me, my friend Shane. And Shane had a YouTube channel when I first started 4 years ago, and he had 6,000 subscribers. And I thought to myself, we were joking about this, man, I'm never going to get to 6,000. No way. I can't believe, wow, you got 6,000 subscribers. The first video that I did on my channel was June 8th, 2016. So it'll be 4 years in a couple days. Just hit 1 million views yesterday. The very first video I did. And it was a video on developing your ear. I have, 35, 40 videos that are over 1 million or 1 million plus on my channel. But the amount of work that it takes, as you know, just to produce one video is incredible. And if you have 300 people in a video, like you did, that's still, I gotta say, it's one of the most amazing things I've seen on YouTube. And when I watch it, it makes me nervous because I know how much work. And I think, what if Christian's hard drive failed? What if this happened? I keep thinking to myself, I wonder if he was saving it and then bouncing down part of it and putting it somewhere safe just in case something happened and just was doing it in sections. Did you even think about things like that?
No, because I didn't know what a ride I was on until I got off it. It was just like, oh, that was hard. But I think
Christian, that's kind of an understatement. That was hard. No, it was
tough. But the truth of the matter, though, is, Rick, and this is something I'm seeing friends of mine who've set up recently, say my business partner Paul as well, is that you can put as much energy into that as you would, say, a film score or something, or a few episodes of a TV show. and you get 20, 25,000 views. And I literally burped out a video about the death of the EXS-24. And within 2 weeks, 52,000 views. That's a similarity with your career as a musician. It's about the whole. What I've spotted in you and what I've really tried to do myself, and I wouldn't say that I've had any videos that have gone viral, but I've had a few videos that have been surprisingly more popular than others. It's so easy, I think, to fall into the viral trap. And I think I've seen other music YouTubers do it and become less happy as a consequence. Have you had to kind of fight that? Because, for example, the thing you did about Apple was great. It was absolutely fantastic. And it was journalistically very kind of valid. And it was viral. Was it tempting to go, I'm going to do a rant channel?
You don't think about how polarizing Apple users versus PC users are. I could do viral videos pretty easily, I think, if I wanted to. It doesn't interest me because ultimately you have to be enthused by the things that you're doing. And I do videos on things that I'm excited about because I think that people then sense that excitement in me, and they're engaged by that. I did a video a few days ago. A famous jazz drummer, Jimmy Cobb, passed away. And he played on Kind of Blue, which is Miles Davis's the biggest selling jazz record of all time. Probably the most important jazz record of all time. And he was the drummer on it. And many of the people that were on the session passed away in the 60s even. So many of these famous jazz musicians died in their 40s back then. He lived to be 91. And I met him. I taught at the New School in Manhattan for a semester in 1988. And he was a professor there. And I was a massively big fan. I got to meet him, and I told the story about this. I knew the video wasn't going to get any views. It's gotten 70, 80,000 views or so. And on my channel, with 1.5 million subscribers, is very, very small. And people don't know who he is. There's no way to title it, but I had to make the video because it's important to me, and it's important to talk about his legacy.
Yes.
And if you're not going to use your channel for things like that, to me, there's just no point in having a channel.
My own personal storyline, which I've spoken to you of ad nauseum, Rick, because of snobbery, I couldn't really get into music college and use technology to bypass that and the need to read. Hats off, and I shake hands with anyone who's had gone to the incredible effort of going to music college and stuff, but I just found a different route. And that's something I'm aware of with YouTube, which is so exciting, is that there are many people who can't afford education who can find it here. And I think what's particularly interesting is what's happening to education this year is I think a lot of students are actually asking what it is they're paying for, because suddenly all of their tutors have gone online, and it's very obvious to them that they're not very good at it online.
The pandemic has exposed all of this. And once the people go online, then they're really competing with YouTubers or content creators online that know how to use cameras, that know how to put music in their videos, that know all these things, know how to edit, and they're just not compelling to the students. And the students are used to watching YouTube. They know what a YouTube video is, and then they see their professors on a camera, they're thinking, yeah, why am I paying for this? They're terrible at this.
It's just so blatantly obvious when you haven't done that with a YouTube video. So it'd be idiotic to repeat, well, that really caught no one's imagination. I'll do that again then. Whereas I think that we all remember going to school and we had that teacher who never caught your imagination. And I think particularly when people are facing, part of their early adult life in debt, I think it is raising some very interesting questions that I think are both exciting and probably troubling for some parts of our industry.
There is something to that. Yes, you can become a good YouTuber by making a lot of videos, but having on-camera presence and talking to the camera like it's a person,
yes,
you are a complete natural at.
Oh, thank you.
Not only that, but you have your own aesthetic for how to edit a video. Mm-hmm. Obviously, your family have been in show business, so you have that in. That's part of the family. Maybe it's just a genetic thing that you're just good on camera and good at talking to the camera.
It's something that I think that frustrates me in life as general is people talking about things on a human level. It's when someone's being interviewed and they're lying. And I think the problem I have with a lot of YouTubers is that disingenuineness. They're smiling, but their eyes are telling you a whole different story.
I have found myself trying some things that you do in your videos. I have done that, and I always think to myself, it works so well for Christian.
It's
the
fun.
quick shots, being in different places. I'm walking around my backyard. I'll try here. But you're in the mountains, and then you're on a train.
I had to give all of that walking around stuff up because I got terrible tendonitis in an elbow. And there was one morning where I couldn't lift a cup of coffee, and I was like, this is not
That's
worth
from
it.
holding your camera, right?
Yeah. Do you remember? We had this discussion, but no. Before we get on to our film of the week, I don't want to mention the C word because it's something that we've talked about a lot before, but I think something has developed on the YouTube platform. Now, you've been highly vocal about the what I would call the sport that is being created by copyright claims on YouTube. You are a massive contributor to the platform. Whilst I imagine you have a representative at YouTube that you speak to, it really is down to the algorithm. Joe Rogan recently has been bought by, his podcast, which is a massive presence on YouTube as well as the podcasting platforms, has been bought by Spotify. And I wonder whether you have any views on that and how maybe the demonopolization of YouTube possibly could be good for creators.
It definitely will affect the way that he does things, no question about that. The thing of the term that I use, ghost host, I use the term throttling back. YouTube will throttle back certain content because it doesn't either it doesn't fit with whatever the narrative that they're pushing at the time is, or it doesn't fit with what they think your channel should be about. When it comes down to the copyright thing, as you know, I'm very vocal about that. I had a couple of things recently where two big things where I made videos that did really well, which actually changed what happened with the video. I did a video on the Mixolydian mode where I used the song She Said by the Beatles. And I played the melody on acoustic guitar, demonstrating the Mixolydian mode. And the Beatles demonetized, their publisher demonetized my video. And then I made a response video on that, a rant, that came out the next day. And I didn't dispute the claim because I've never disputed a claim ever on my channel, not once.
To clarify, that's one surefire way of getting a strike, isn't it?
There's 2 steps to go to get a strike. You can dispute it and lose, and then you dispute it again and lose the second time, you get a strike. 3 strikes and you're out. They take your channel down. So I made a video saying, this is outrageous. This is as good of an example of fair use. I'm making a video on a mode. I'm using a song to demonstrate. I'm not using the sound recording. I'm simply playing the melody on the guitar and saying how these notes are used from the Mixolydian mode for this melody. And it got demonetized. Well, that video, my rant video, got 500,000 views. And the next day, the monetization claim was taken away without a dispute. I think I said something like, don't the Beatles have enough money? Don't Lennon and McCartney have enough money? I mean, one of my daughter's name is Lennon. I mean, I'm a massive Beatles fan, and I have no problem with people making money. They should. When my videos are demonetized, when I'm using songs, I have no problem with that. Not at all. But that was obviously an example of fair use. And then I did a video about, 3-4 weeks ago. I did a What Makes This Song Great video on Led Zeppelin Ramble On. And I had done one Led Zeppelin video with the song Whole Lotta Love about a year ago or so. And that video was up for about 4 weeks and then got taken down for a couple months and then got put back up. I don't know why. I never heard anything about it, but there are no Led Zeppelin videos where you use the original recordings that are up on YouTube. So that one got put up. So I thought, well, maybe I've been whitelisted. You have no idea. I do not have a YouTube representative. I've never really spoken with anyone at YouTube ever.
That's incredible. I mean,
not only that, I'm not even verified on YouTube. I don't have a check mark on YouTube. I don't have a check mark on Instagram where I've got about 175,000 followers. I don't have one on Facebook. I don't have a check mark anywhere. I am not verified on any platform. None. With over 1.5 million followers, I don't even have a check mark on YouTube. Okay? And I don't have a representative, and I've never spoken to one single person at YouTube. ever. So I did the Led Zeppelin video thinking, okay, no problem, it's going to go up. Instant block. So I take my camera out, I go back by my amplifiers in the back, and I make this video about, this is ridiculous, that I made a video called The Irrelevance of Classic Rock in the Age of Perfect Music. Perfect music meaning music that's been hacked apart, quantized, pitch corrected, everything, And that it's ridiculous for them to block my video when I'm just making essentially commercials for their music that is 50 years old at this point. And people were tagging, I don't know what happened, but people tagged Jimmy Page and Robert Plant on Twitter, and the next day it was unblocked. And I put it up, and it became a trending video on YouTube. So there is a power in making these rant videos. The rant video I made got 500,000 views also.
It reminds me, I don't know if you recall a book from the 1990s called Who Stole My Cheese? Mm-mm. It was a self-help book, and it was just about the behavior of humans versus the behavior of mice. And if you were to shrink humans down into a maze and put cheese on a table for months on end, they'd eat it readily just like the mice would. But if you were to move the cheese to a different point of the maze, the humans would go, who stole my cheese? And the mice would go looking for cheese elsewhere. And and I think that there are certain people who will do that and will be winners as a consequence. And I think that it's not just about new points of revenue. It is about, if you do have a very valuable catalogue that is not part of the blanket agreements, so it's not getting synchronised on everyday television in the UK, very difficult and incredibly expensive and long-winded process to get it synchronised on films, but it's also not being spoken about in the historical context of the history of rock and what makes songs great. I am sorry, and I'm going to speak to the microphone here because, Drew, if you're watching, I know you disagree with me wholeheartedly. I simply cannot tell you where my kids are going to access the Beatles without me just simply sitting them down and going, you need to listen to this, this is important. And I think as a consequence, I can safely say, my kids are singing, they'll sing something, they'll come through and they'll be singing something from the 80s, and you just go, where did you hear that? And they go, oh, it's on this so-and-so rapper. And it's like, oh, it's been sampled and it's on that track. It legitimizes it for my children because then they can connect when they hear the original, and there's all sorts of stuff there. But really, my kids, genuinely, and this is maybe remiss of me as a father, they don't know who the Beatles are.
Neither do mine. They just don't. You'll hear a song, they'll say, oh, Roundabout. They'll hear Roundabout because that was in a meme, and they'll know that song. And a lot of 80s music has been have been used for memes and things like that. My kids are familiar with, and you're always shocked. Where did you hear that? Because and I found that music from the 80s on is typically has no problem. It'll get demonetized, but will not get blocked. But the idea that the Beatles, I don't know, Christian, is it just that it doesn't matter to them? It's strictly about money? What do you think?
I think that they're treated as sacred texts. I think that there was that whole idea of selling out. The story that people don't tell about the Beatles is one of the main reasons that McCartney cited for leaving the band. Long and Winding Road. They got that
Phil Spector.
Yeah. And actually, if you listen to it, try and contextualize it. You go, this is like easy listening. This was seriously uncool arrangement for the day.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem, is it was a lack of trust in the industry. And as a consequence, it's like, I don't want my stuff. I don't want to sell out. I don't want it appearing on adverts. I don't want it appearing on Tesla commercials. But the problem is it's a blanket issue that now it means that the music will lack its legitimacy. And I think if you want to look after it as a business that's going to go on for, 70 years past when Paul McCartney, hopefully not for a long time, passes away.
There's an article that I read recently that someone sent to me talking about how historical figures in music and the entertainment industry have a shelf life, even the Beatles. Okay, it could be 5 to 20 years or so, but eventually, this guy is a professor at MIT, and he studies these things. He said he was singing the song Imagine, or was playing it. This grad student came in and said, is that a Coldplay song? And he said, what? I've started noticing, honestly, Christian, there is a backlash to the Beatles in my comments section that has happened over the last year and a half or so. the Beatles are so played out. Oh, the Beatles are this and that. Oh, that's old person's music. It's hard to believe that the Beatles have become uncool. And you start to see it with other groups, even bands like U2, who I love.
Yeah, they're not liked by young people, are they?
They're not liked by young people.
And I guess it is, I think that idea of enabling what you have done to be recontextualized, I think is a very important thing, and something that I would, say to people. You need to be careful about being a little bit too proud, I would say. Now, there is something that all of our children know about, and that is turning it up to 11. Talk about a film that's left a legacy.
Spinal Tap. Spinal Tap is what's funny about Spinal Tap, Christian, is that how true the jokes are jokes in it, but actually, if you've played in a band, everybody's had an experience where they couldn't find the stage entrance.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had that experience, and we all, hello, Cleveland, we all start making that joke as we're walking around with our instruments trying to find how do you get on stage. And so many parts of that movie are really true. There's always been this debate on who is the band. Some people say Foghat, but I always thought it was Blue Oyster Cult was the band that they modeled it after. And one of the most brilliant movies about music of all time, and it's a parody mockumentary. And
I believe the first as well. So, I mean, without Spinal Tap, you don't get The Office, you don't get Larry David. This is the first instance of that. To the point that so many people, the first time they watched it, they thought it was real.
Some people really thought that it was real when it came out. That obviously didn't. I don't know how you could even think that was real. It's the most hysterically funny movie. One of the greatest movies on music that has ever been made.
Agree. And I really, your point about this, the jokes, you see, for me, it's quite niche or niche, as you say in America, in the sense that you've had to have been in a band. But if you've been in any band, all of the jokes you get, whether you're in like a band that only lasted 2 weeks and played down at your local pub and that was it, or you were in Metallica and we have evidence to prove it, the arguments are the same.
Yes. Boston, that's not a college town. I mean, so many of these things, the fact that Rob Reiner understood this too, it really blows me away. Because I don't know if Rob Reiner being a musician at all, but yet he gets all the humor. Every second of that movie has a gag. The girlfriend that is the album designer, the Stonehenge. Well, I thought it was inches. It's just the pod that won't open on stage, and the bass player is stuck in there and opens at the end. I mean, just the absurdity of these things, and it is really one of the greatest movies on music of all time.
Must have been a decision. They've all got to play these things.
I mean, most of the time when you have movies on music, the people can't play, and it always astounds me that they don't find people to actually play the parts and just zoom in on their hands. There's so many bad miming videos out there that the technology to actually bring someone in to play the things has always existed. Why do they have people faking things so poorly? But in Spinal Tap, you have people that actually perform the songs, could play them, could sing them. It's incredible. I mean, that's another great thing about that movie.
You watched something like the Queen thing recently, Bohemian Rhapsody, where they kind of construct how they kind of wrote the songs and put them together and recorded, and it's all like, it's just, that's not, it just, I find it almost kind of toe-curlingly unwatchable as a musician, because you go, that's just not what it's like. It's, it's actually quite, what we do is quite boring to most people. I love that thing in the studio when someone comes in who's my parents would refer to of non-showbiz folk as a civilian, and how they find it interesting for exactly 15 minutes, and then it's the most boring thing on the planet.
No, it's totally true. When people wanted to come to the studio, oh, you really want to come? Okay, and they sit around for an hour, they watch, and they see it's a lot of punching in, editing, working on parts, and it's unbelievably boring.
I think the last great film I saw was the Metallica one, which is it some kind of Beautiful or something like that? And it's very tap at points. You know, they've got a group psychoanalyst who like becomes part of the band and starts referring to the band as we. And then there's that great moment when they hire, is it Robert Trujillo? You know, and that's a film well worth watching. But I think, you know, it cannot be. I mean, how many kind of tropes were set in Spinal Tap? The fact that, I mean, I don't know if you're aware that the BBC has a streaming platform called iPlayer. And, you know, this is the BBC, and it basically means that whatever was on TV last night, you can catch up and watch today, and it's available for about a month. And the controls of that go up to 11. And there are so many things where things go up to 11, and it's because of Spinal Tap. And I think that there's so many times you'll see stuff that's quoted. But I think another thing that they achieved, I don't know if you agree with me on this, with possible exception to the comedian Billy Connolly, there is nothing less funny than a funny song. But the songs in this are really funny.
They're very funny.
You know where you stand in a hellhole. I mean, it has to be my favourite line of all time.
Every musician I know knows how real it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hilarious, and yet you always think to yourself, oh, yeah, I've done that before. Oh, I've done that before.
There's the details as well. I love the detail, like, for example, at Big Bottom, which has the greatest pun of all time. Big Bottoms drive me out of my mind. How can I leave this behind? But what is like, what they don't even point out that they're all playing basses.
Right, exactly.
And then there's when they have the matching coleslaw as well. There's all of these little details, which is just fantastic. But also a lot of the retro stuff of them when they were the originals and when they were the new originals and stuff. A lot of that pastiche was great. But also the thing that's worth mentioning is not only was there a legitimacy because they were musicians, but I think coming from acting stock, I think that those are the best English accents by American actors ever.
That is really fascinating to hear that, because I always wondered about when people hear English accents, what English people think of them. So those are really good.
Well, they're not only really good, they're really specific. I think one of the problems with British accents, really, is that they are so... I mean, there is a north, south, west and east London accent. You know, that's just one city. People tend to have a mixture of these things. So what happens when American people go to voice coaches, it's like, yeah, you've been kind of given the vanilla version of that accent, but you need to put a bit of nuance in there. And that's what's amazing about these accents, is it's absolutely rock stars. I'd cite particularly someone like Cliff Richard, arguably not a rock star, but Cliff Richard was the perfect embodiment of what we'd refer to as a mid-Atlantic accent. People who just, because you were imitating Mick Jagger for a while had it. You were imitating kind of the blues stars. You were imitating American artists. You would sing with an American accent, and then you'd take interviews and you'd get this twang. You'd want to sound a little bit like, you know, these Johnny Cash or whoever. So it was really well observed. But I would have to say, if I had to name one performance, and I'm not being politically correct here, I think that the best performance is Janine. I think she is just so spot on, so dislikable.
No.
Rock does ebb and flow, and there was a real... I mean, the whole grunge thing was a reaction against the soft rock thing that haunted us in the late 1980s, I believe. But I think that something that often gets totally eclipsed with rock music, it's often the fame, the showmanship, and particularly the musicianship that eclipses actually what are amazing compositions. Now, the people that jump to mind that I think are underrated as composers, but are some of the greatest composers of the late 20th century, I would say Jimi Hendrix. And the other is Dolly Parton, and her stagemanship and her musicianship often eclipse, and her personality often eclipse the fact that she wrote that Whitney Houston track that she didn't let Elvis record. Are there any kind of rock gods or rock bands that you think are overlooked as composers because of their showmanship or musicianship?
I can find examples of that because I speak of that a lot in my channel. That's a favorite topic of mine. People whose music was far more complex, sophisticated, and it was disguised under seemingly bad playing, or what some people would consider bad playing. And a band that comes to mind is Nirvana. Kurt Cobain's melodies were very sophisticated. His chord progressions, the use of a lot of upper extensions, 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths in his, in the melody of Smell Like Teen Spirit. Very sophisticated melody, very intervallic. There's a lot of tunes on the second record, Nevermind, that have modulations with chromatic movement of chords that are constantly changing keys, yet his melody is working perfectly with it. I always thought he played it sloppily on purpose to disguise how good the melody writing was, but incredibly sophisticated melody writer with non-virtuosic or even amateurish, some people think, musicianship. But he was a very, very sophisticated writer. So I find that much more that there are people that are just completely, not regarded as being good musicians, that are actually excellent players and musicians and writers.
David Grohl, I saw him being interviewed about Kurt Cobain recently, and clearly, Dave Grohl has made huge success as a songwriter, as a singer, as the frontman of Foo Fighters, but did give the impression that he felt that Kurt Cobain as a writer, as a songsmith, was a league beyond.
I mean, to me, he's in league with the Beatles. His melody writing is just incredible. He and there's been no one since him that I think could write melodies as sophisticated. And people hear me say this on my channel, talk about Nirvana, and they always are scratching their head. Unless I demonstrate, I just did a video on Smells Like Teen Spirit, but that's not even close to being his most sophisticated melody. I think Kurt Cobain was very much he was a huge Beatles fan, but I think in particular a John Lennon fan. And he internalized Lennon's melody style, the notes that he used over the chords, the unusual notes. Lennon had such a great ear for melody. And I'm not to say that Paul McCartney didn't, but that he is an instance of someone that is just the opposite of what we talked about.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fascinating. And do you think the likes of Lennon and Kurt Cobain, I'm probably going to sound like a snob here, which I don't intend to at all, but do you think they're thinking in that respect, or is it because they're absorbing a lot of different influences, or they're just kind of touched by an inner kind of musical gene that's kind of
yes.
Really?
They just have an innate sense of melody. And having a great sense of melody is understanding balance. Balance in melody writing, how do you write a melody or a phrase that suggests another phrase, the antecedent and consequent, or question and answer, whatever you want to call it. They were able to write these things like that. They just heard it that way. That's what's so incredible about it.
Yeah, because when you get a band like Steely Dan, who I really respect massively, this feels a little bit more considered to me, that they're pushing the boundaries and they're doing very clever stuff, and you're like, you kind of go, I'm finding it very difficult to count this, and that's great because you're still making it sound like music, brilliant. But it's those tracks which are kind of hidden. I don't know. Another one for me, is Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. It's just what is going on there. And I was brilliant. I saw an interview with Jimmy Page, and he just goes, "I don't know where that one came from." It was a moment. But also to this day, I find that one very difficult to count. But you'll see people listening to it and just kind of not knowing. It's an incredibly complex piece of music.
Not only was he a sophisticated musician, as was John Paul Jones, as was everyone in the band, but Jimmy Page paid for their first album, £4,300 to make Zeppelin 1, and owned the masters. And I believe owns the masters to every Led Zeppelin record.
And for context, people just didn't do that in those days.
No, they never knew to do that. Who knew in 1968 that I'm going to pay for the record? Well, he knew how much studio time cost because he was in studios all the time. So he figured, okay, this is going to be, we have something here. I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to own it. And I think that he personally, I may be wrong about it, but I think he owns all their entire catalog himself.
Well, to end on a slightly, I don't know, more comic note, to tie in the Spinal Tap thing and everyone has their puppet show, I stumbled across a piece of footage with someone who you mentioned earlier, which it was back in the day, there was this thing called Live Aid. And it started in Wembley and it ended in Pittsburgh. And there was this artist called Phil Collins who performed at Wembley Stadium. And there was this plane called Concorde that could get you across to New York in 3 hours. So this was a big thing that he was going to fly over. And then he was going to do a gig with Led Zeppelin and a version of Stairway to Heaven. It was apparently, I don't remember seeing it, it was apparently one of the worst gigs of Jimmy Page's career. And I recently found it's on YouTube. Now, they've cut it from all of the Live Aid films and this, that, and the other. But it is incredible to see members of Led Zeppelin, John Paul Jones, Robert Plant, and Jimmy Page having the worst gig of their life.
I know. I've seen it's really unbelievable.
But I think what's very interesting about that performance, and I just think as a final kind of demonstration of what we've been talking about, is that it wasn't just Jimmy Page who was one of the composers within Led Zeppelin. It was also John Bonham. And the problem was that if you don't play that symphonic part, like the symphony that it is, you can't just plough through it like a pub drummer, even if you're a really good pub drummer like Phil Collins. And I think that therein lies a demonstration of the value of these parts were thought out.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. I take apart records all the time, and I've been a producer for years, but it's hard to believe that some of these things were actually recorded, that there at one point there was a blank tape, and then they start layering with the acoustic guitar, and then they build the arrangement. The John Paul Jones playing the recorders, the 4-part recorder thing in the intro is unbelievable. No one ever talks about that, how great that is, the arrangement that he came up with, and just creating something like that, especially over the course of 7 minutes or however long Stairway is. It's just it blows my mind.
Well, listen, Rick, this has been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything that we should be looking out for that's coming up? Have you got anything up your sleeve on your channel?
Well, the next big thing is going to be my What Makes This Song Great episode 100. The next one I'm doing is 92. I don't know what that is, but I'm going to do it tomorrow. But I have to think of something really good, a song that'll be for the 100th episode, and I welcome any in the comments section if anyone wants to suggest things.
Just as a final thought, when you've been taking these songs to pieces, is it full of surprises for you as well? You think
Yes.
you know a song?
I always marvel at how well so many of these songs are actually produced, and the tones, the parts, how well they're played, the choice of the drum sounds, things like that. It really is it's remarkable to me.
It was a very revered process, and I think that if I imagine we possibly may share this view, if I was to make any recommendations to people going into this, is to revere that process. It's not about layering plugins. It's about get the recording, get the performance, and get the spirit and the heart right.
Yes, and the fact that these people got takes, they would play with dynamics instead of just using what I call additive production, where they just, it needs to get bigger here, so we'll just add more stuff on it, instead of, how about we just play louder here, or come up with a part that has more energy in this section, So that was the recording limitations of those times, to me, is what helped these people create these great songs and great arrangements, I think.
Rick Beato, thank you so much.
Thank you, Christian. Appreciate it.
Rick's channel is linked down below, and I think we can all thank him for his very precious time, insights, and it was just so much fun to talk about Spinal Tap with him. Right, it's time for...
Peter is kicking off this week's Pianodrop with his swarming music box. He says a few years ago he bought the music box in a museum shop, and you can make your own music by punching holes in the paper strips, but it's also ideal for sampling. He sampled 15 notes of this music box and the associated mechanical noises using a Rode NT2A microphone.
And I really love this instrument. Just the GUI is just, I love it. So, just lovely. Okay, so this is the no decay swarm. Let's have an exponential pulses, one layer. I'm sure there's a massive drop-off at this point. If I look at the graph of when people stopped viewing, it's probably at this point because that's my weekend sorted out. I don't know about you. Just such a wonderful thing to play with. I had a discussion with someone this week about the romance of sampling, and they kind of chuckled to themselves, what's romantic about sampling? It's art. Thank you.
Next up is Mark Allnutt with his Trumpetuba. It's an orchestral synth pad that sounds like multiple brass musicians playing in a stadium. He says when recording the debut pop album for a client, we needed a trumpeter for a gypsy-esque party song. There was a section of takes where the trumpeter growled through his instrument, and the tone of the notes was truly unique.
I've always thought trumpets make good sound design sources. In fact, I created something called Trumpet Fields, which is part of the Spitfire Audio Labs range, another range of free samples that come in their own plugin, linked below. But thanks so much for the Trumpetuba.
Our next piano comes from someone whose name is practically synonymous with Piano Book itself. It's our friend Stephen Tallamy. He's here with his family piano. Now, Welmar pianos are often described as a fine English piano and were manufactured in the UK in the early 2000s. Having previously distributed German pianos, Welmar learned a lot about how to craft their pianos that stay very nicely in tune.
This community has much to thank Stephen for, but particularly this effort. It's really quite a beautiful thing.
Next up on our throwback list, we have the Weber Baby Grand piano from David Hilowitz, one of our top contributors here. He writes, "My mother is a pianist, and this piano belonged to her. It was purchased when she was a teenager in the 1950s and stayed in our family until just recently. A few summers ago, my mother was moving from Boston to Florida and didn't have room in her new place for the beloved instrument. She offered it to me, but I didn't have the space either. After much heartache, she finally decided to give it away to charity. Before she did, I thought it would be nice to sample it so that we could all have the memory of the way it sounded."
I love it. It's really mono, and what I would do immediately, other than, you could go in, I can see that it's multi-sampled massively, so you could go in and adjust the kind of panning position, so more to the left here, up to the right here, kind of cheat it. But also, a simple thing to do is just to get a really small reverb. So let's just go. What you can do is combine reverbs, so I can actually hear there's one on the actual instrument itself. Let's just take that reverb out, and just so I can control what I'm doing here. And I'm just going to go in and load my favorite kind of hall reverb in Fab Filter R, which is the Vienna. And let's just hear whether this stereoification, does it just make it sound boxy and reverby, works in the context of putting it maybe into an orchestral setting in a large warm hall. So that to me doesn't sound too roomy. It just sounds quite stereo, like the mics are at a distance. And let's hear it with this. I think that's the first time I've ever modulated on all of the little noodles I've done for Piano Book. So I don't know about you, but my ears can't, or my brain can't untangle the two reverbs. And it's a great way of making a sound slightly less two-dimensional. Not that it wasn't in this case, it just was very mono-sounding.
Last but not least is the Kristiansand Concert Steinway given to us by Pete Malkin. Now, the Kristiansand Concert Steinway is a 12-year-old concert grand Steinway bought at the opening of the new Kilden Theatre in Kristiansand, Norway. Kristiansand is a small town in the south of Norway with 2 direct flights in and out from London a week. The government here put money into the Kilden to provide art to the region, where they value its importance. And there is a resident symphony orchestra, and this piano is often played during their concerts.
Well, thanks to all of you for watching till the end. Thank you so much to Rick Beato, and do check out and subscribe to Oliver's YouTube channel alongside all of the amazing nerditry that you've been up to this week, linked below alongside all of these fantastic pianos. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be doing a Piano Book highlights of the month, in which will include a lot more new pianos that have been put up on the site. Thanks, as always, for your contributions there, both with the pianos and the amazing demos. So plenty to be getting on with there this weekend, and I hope you have a fantastic and a safe weekend, and you have time to rest and recuperate. And let's just hope that next week is just that little bit better than this week. Love to you all. See you soon.